Welcome to the SEO Insider with your host, Seth Price, founder of Blue Shark, taking you inside the world of legal marketing and all things digital.
Welcome, everyone. We're thrilled to have Cameron Herold here. As somebody I've followed for many years, a legend in the space. Welcome, Cameron.
Hey, Seth. Thanks for having me.
One of the things that we've talked about offline has been, there are a ton of people in the CEO space talking about how to, get yourself better. But you seem to have found in the COO space sort of a whole blue ocean where nobody really was taking the lead and sort of making this a thing.
Yeah, and it actually wasn't even a strategic move so much as just me listening to my clients. I was coaching a few different clients about 7 years ago. They had about 50 to 300 employees, 3 different companies, and they all wanted me to get their COO together just to brainstorm. And so I pulled together 10 COOs together for 2.5 days. And at the end of 2.5 days, 9 of the 10 wanted to keep meeting. And that was literally the start of the COO Alliance. And then we kind of realized over time, pretty much in that first year, that there were, YPO and EO and Vistage and Genius Network and so many groups for entrepreneurs, but there really wasn't anything for that second in command. And so that we just kind of doubled down and went hard on it.
One of the things I could say as somebody who's, running a team, there are a lot of people in the legal space, for example, and I know you have a lot of legendary clients in the legal space, but there's always a pull and tug when you go to a mastermind. Some people bring their team with them and some don't. And there's a lot of benefit to doing it, but there's also some negatives in that, you want people rowing in the same direction and like things as much as like, oh, so-and-so is making much more than another. Now that could happen in a group setting, no matter what, but I feel that, the entrepreneurs want to be able to share and talk about all the stuff that, is dirty laundry, ideally in a safe space.
Totally.
And so that having an independent place for the second command seems like, why don't we just slice the bread? It seems like, well, of course there should be. And frankly, the similar thing for the CFO and for the CMO are things that are, so in demand and really don't exist.
Well, they're also just very different DNAs. It's almost like an accountant showing up at a legal, mastermind, or a lawyer showing up at a medical mastermind, or a guy showing up at a bridal shower. We don't fit. We're not supposed to be there. And we kind of need to have our own tribe. And we just left MIT last week. We had a whole huge group of second in commands from a number of different countries. One flew in from Amsterdam, spent 2.5 days together, completely masterminding. And a lot of the discussions were, how do we support this crazy entrepreneurial, bipolar, manic idea, perpetual motion machine of an entrepreneur that they all love, but they realize they need to figure out how do they support that person. And then they want to get deep into the weeds on certain discussions that most entrepreneurs don't want to spend, hours and hours talking about playbooks and systems and processes and dashboards. And, they want to stay at that 30,000 foot level.
No, it is amazing. I can speak for us. I mean, I know a handful of your clients and past clients, and you're and they're good friends of mine. Your descriptions are apropos, and I can speak to our person, the COO Alliance, who is so steady and so like that. The fact that she could be around other people and say, yeah, this is normal. This is the DNA that it takes to be in that position. I assume to a certain extent, those COOs very often are in a vacuum because they generally don't have access to any other best practices. They are going straight to that bipolar person who may or may not be able to support them with what they need.
It's interesting. We started profiling all of our COO Alliance members about 6 years ago, and then we also started profiling their CEO. So we use a Kolbe profile, and the Kolbe profile talks about how a person initiates or starts projects. And most entrepreneurs start by just starting. Like they kind of start now, they plan later, right? Shooting from the hip, winging it, and they need to be that way because if they overthink it, they'll paralyze. Most of the COOs tend to ask a lot of questions before they initiate a project, or they like putting a system or a checklist or a playbook in place before they start the project. And now we have to teach those two people, almost like men are from Mars, women are from Venus. We have to teach them how to speak to each other. The COO needs to be able to speak to the entrepreneurial CEO in sound bites, in executive summaries, and let them know we have all the information, but we're not going to give it to you because we know your hard drive is full. And then the CEO needs to say, hey, I know you want to ask me more questions, so let's just go for a quick walk and you can ask me 7 questions just to catch up to speed. And That's been really kind of an elegant dance over the last few years as well, is really starting to learn the personality profiles of both.
Really interesting. I live between two worlds, right? The law firm world, where everybody's
Right.
aspiring to find the COO. It's the elusive. In digital space, most people have it at some level. It seems like it's a more finite, a more finite task to run. I mean, running lawyers is not for the faint of heart, and
Sure.
probably in most places, if you look at big law, is a two-pronged job: a non-lawyer and a lawyer person. Yes, they report to one COO, but for very different skill sets. What are some of the things that you have seen over time that generally leads to somebody being a great COO versus if you look in hindsight when a client or a member falls out and says, yeah, that didn't work here? Are there any truisms?
It's very similar to a husband and wife getting married. You could have an amazing wife who's a perfect match for her husband, but she'd be a terrible wife for 12 other husbands, right? Because she's a good match for that person's DNA, that person's, personality, that person's hobbies, maybe the stage of life that they're at, the age that they're at. So very similar to a CEO who's looking to hire a second in command. We need to understand the growth trajectory of your firm right now, right? Where you're going to be over the next few years. We need to understand the DNA and the style of leader that you are, whether you're going to be kind of removing yourself from the day-to-day or really deep in it. And then we really need to understand the strengths of that entrepreneur. So I've coached a number of people in the law space. I'll give you a couple examples. You've got a George Sink who's, 85 years old, who's very stuck in kind of the 1970s and 80s methodologies of running a business. And then you've got, a John Barry from Barry Law, who's, type AAA, former military, he's looking for and then you got, William Matar from Rochester, who's like a YPO or a little bit more refined, softer spoken. All three of them are CEOs. All are very, very different in terms of the DNA that they're looking for as their exact match as their second in command. So it's all about understanding yourself as the entrepreneur first.
Well, let me ask you a question. How much of that is personality? Meaning whether or not you can take the fast pace of John Barry or are able to crack the shell of somebody, of one of these other lawyers, versus are there any sort of, like, regardless of whether or not you can match up personality wise, going back to your dating,
right. Are there any skills that match across all?
Are there any things that make you a good wife or spouse that are not personality driven, but like that if you don't have this, regardless of personality, you can't.
You're dead. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so every second in command, and by the way, it doesn't have to be a COO. It could be a vice president of operations, director of operations, depending on the size of your company. But every good second in command or COO needs to be very good at the soft side of business, very good at the people issues, very good at communication, very good at collaboration, very good at, getting good, healthy debate, very good at managing conflict. They've got to be good at situational leadership and coaching and delegation and project management, kind of all of the good, solid executive functioning skills. And then they just need to be good at the stuff their CEO sucks at. So if the CEO is good at finance and marketing, maybe they don't have to be good at finance and marketing. But if their CEO is really good at, legal and ops, maybe they have to be good at marketing and finance. But all the people stuff, they have to be great at for sure.
And that is sort of, so it's combination of, I guess, the skill set and then situational. When you look at, within the COO Alliance, what are some of the things that the CEO can do, assuming you have somebody with good bones, that you see CEOs doing that help propel COO to success, or corollary, what are the things that you see CEOs do that are destructive?
Strangely, it's very similar again to a normal personal marriage. It's about date night. It's about listening. It's about seeking to understand the other person and spending time with the other person, right? So the CEO needs to spend time with the COO, away from the rest of the kids, away from the rest of the leadership team. They need to spend time listening to the COO when the COO is struggling or frustrated. They need to be there to mentor and coach them and really have strong trust and communication. So that's just very, very similar to this kind of strange dynamic that we have in a marriage.
No, I love it. I use the dating analogy for much of life, from sales through clients to hiring, et cetera. So this is I love it. My team is going to love this interview. So from the point of view, you've seen when things, let's talk about the negative, when stuff doesn't work, you could say it's the corollary. They don't take date nights. They don't do these things.
Right.
Are there elements or things that you see over and over again where you wish you could just yell from the mountaintops to the CEOs, because you spend so much time with limited time with the CEOs, unless you're coaching somebody specifically? Are there things that you wish you could have a broadcast thing where there's a weekly reminder to them about different elements?
Yeah, a couple of really good ones. Number one, I've actually engaged a very high-powered Wall Street marriage counselor to work with CEOs and COOs on their communication and trust and collaboration, because sometimes the frustration gets so overwhelming, the CEO's like, fuck it. Well, guess what? The next person's going to drive you crazy too, right? So try your hardest to make that thing work until you just know for sure it never will. So that's one, is kind of engage in that kind of marriage counseling, really solid communication, collaboration. The other one is CEOs rarely praise people and show gratitude and thank people anywhere near as often as they should. We tell our spouse that we love them multiple times a day, and yet we don't tell our leadership team members that we love them or thank you, or maybe we tell them once every 6 weeks. Oh, they know, but then we're piling on business, more projects and more tasks and more problems and more work, and but they know we love them. No, they kind of forget. And I think that entrepreneurial CEOs need to really engage at a lot more gratitude, almost like God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. We need to use those in that ratio. We also need to praise people and say thank you and celebrate core values and celebrate goals twice as often as we, show them all the stuff we need to work on.
Still funny as you say these things. I'm thinking about all these missed opportunities for myself. So, and one of the things I think humorous, we're spending a lot of time with AI, and ChatGPT is sort of one of the early, tools. One of the things I love about it is when you ask it to respond to an email, for example, and I'm not talking about but the analogy would work for what you're talking about. And there's an angry client, and it fills in all the pleasantries of I'm so sorry you're experiencing this. We'll do our very, and all the stuff that you should be doing.
You don't take the time to do.
I almost feel like I need to have ChatGPT prep me for some of these meetings, not because I don't know what the substances to speak about, but reminding me of what are those things, because you jump right into it as somebody who's a quick start.
Totally.
I'm dumping stuff in, and I probably if anything, what I'm calling formality is not formality. It's really some of those important building blocks. And if you ignore it too long, you will be in trouble.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned ChatGPT and AI. There's a fantastic database called Theirs and AI for that. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's got 7,900 different AI tools that exist for about 3,000 different AI tasks. And everybody's talking about ChatGPT. That's one of the 7,900 other tools that are out there. I've been telling all my employees and all our COO Alliance members that the only employee who's at danger of being replaced by AI are the employees that don't proactively engage and start leveraging AI, right? And I want people to spend 2 hours a week, which is only 5% of their week, but spend 2 hours a week playing with all these different AI tools, and then report back on Monday in a 5-minute book report. Hey, here's a thing that I use ChatGPT for. Here's how I use Descript. Here's how I use Be Human. Here's how I use Midjourney, and show us what you did with playing around with this little tool. And if all of our employees spend 5 minutes of their time looking for ways to automate or optimize their life or the business, wow, we would really supercharge our growth.
No, it is true. And it's funny because it's a tale of two cities. I see it from the digital side where the Gen Zers, they may not want to work past 6 o'clock, but they're all in.
They're all in. Yeah.
And I come to the law firm and it's unless I tell somebody what to do and how to do it, it's not happening. And it's one of the reasons the law firms are going to get their asses kicked as money comes in from Wall Street and people figure these things out.
Well, and you're one of the very rare, well, that shouldn't say the very rare. It's been really interesting seeing a fair number of lawyers or law firms that are really embracing digital marketing. And I think you're on the kind of forefront of that in educating people and showing it to them. But it used to be that was an industry that just didn't understand marketing, didn't understand operations. And I think of all of the kind of professional services that are out there, whether you go medicine and, chiropractic and dental and architecture, I think law firms, especially the ones that are in the personal injury space, have really started to figure out digital marketing, which is kind of cool.
No, it is, but it's also a tale of two cities because most of your touch points and the people who are willing to engage with you are in that space,
True.
with the rare exceptions.
True.
And so when you leave that, it's like the tale of two cities, you know, the
True.
PI space and the non-PI space. And you go back, you know, we're, you know, presenting at a DUI conference coming up, and it's like, these are, you know, it's back to the dinosaurs and people that have not scaled and have their modest
Right.
practice with a few people that they, you know, that they deal with or yell at or what have you, but it's rather dysfunctional. And I think that's one of the things that's nice that I've seen in the PI space is that, yes, there's a lot of dysfunction, but there's enough bandwidth within the organization generally that somebody can take a look at it and say, okay, either I'm going to do this or we're going to hire somebody to actually get their hands dirty and understand it rather than just write checks and hope things work.
Totally. Yep, I got it.
So, you know, you've also worked a lot with people on the digital side. Want to get some of your thoughts and takeaways, you know, of what are some of the things that you see from from your perspective, from the operations perspective, that would be really beneficial, or what are the things that people mess up on there?
I'll go back to two of the founding members of the COO Alliance. One is now the CEO of a company called Tenuity. They've got 1,800 employees. So Zach Morrison was the founding member. He was the guy who gave me the idea for the COO Alliance. It used to be called Elite SEM, and I coached them from 40 people up to about 300. And when I first started coaching Zach, one of their big goals was to get to 100 employees. And I said, if I ever hear you give me the number of employees as a goal, I will fucking quit. Like, I'm not going to coach you if you don't understand the pain in the ass factor of people is not a goal to have more of. So we really worked very, very hard to build a culture where their employee net promoter score was very high, but that we could also then almost overload people with more work. And the reason we could give them more and get so much more productivity out of them was they were so happy working with us. So that was case study one. The second one is called Acceleration Partners, and Matt Wool is now the CEO. He was their COO. They're at about 300 employees. Again, coached them from about 40 up to about 120. They were always a distributed company. They never had a single office space. They never had two people working out of the same place. And they worked very, very hard 8-10 years ago, understanding how to actually build a strong company culture in the absence of a physical, four-walled office space. And I thought it was really interesting to watch a company way before COVID really obsessing about how do we make this amazing company culture. And they understood that it had nothing to do with physical space. It had to do with collaboration, alignment with vision, really caring about the people, putting systems in place to grow the people, making sure that they covered Maslow's hierarchy and that they had all 5 layers of Maslow's hierarchy being met within the company. But those were a couple of interesting case studies, just really, really caring about people, and then watching this massive growth of both of those companies from the people side and also from the revenue side.
It's funny because during COVID, Blue Shark went from fully in office to 0 office to now a clubhouse where people come once or twice a week if they're in the city, and less people are in town now around the country and around the world. Yeah. What are some of those things? Because you touched on culture several times, obviously key to building and growing a company. Is there different skill sets needed? Like what are your thoughts on when you don't have people in front of you every day, how the challenges of creating that culture so that you can overload people and they won't leave, that's a whole nother topic.
Leaders, obviously there's the alignment with a vivid vision, and there's alignment with core values, and there's alignment with purpose, and there's clarity around roles and responsibilities and org chart and communication protocols. That's all kind of normal, that's kind of the meat and potatoes. I think where companies have to get very good is being present, being very mindful of the other people they're working with, observing body language. You don't need to meet with somebody for an hour. You can meet with them for 7 minutes, but in that 7 minutes, be completely focused and paying attention to the other, so you can read the body language and you can read the intonation. And then I think it's also just about slowing down a little bit to kind of have that connection, that we can't run all of our Zoom meetings, boom, boom, in the absence of actually having that human connection. Because the reality is, if that's the only time in the week that we chat with that employee, that means the other 39 or 49 hours next week, they have no interaction with us at all. They don't see us in the hallway. They don't see us in the lunchroom. So just being mindful about that human connection. And then lastly, it's about really caring about the people, not just their birthday and their dog's name, but actually really knowing what's going on in their life. What are their dreams? What are their desires? What's on their bucket list? Like, how can you really care about them as a person more than anyone else cares about them? And then if you're caring about their humanity that much, they're going to go through brick walls for you to build your company. And that's a very new skill. That's a very kind of millennial, like the post-2000 skill. Because prior to that, it was like, we didn't blend, right? It was like, this is my office, it's my company, get your job done. We didn't blend that at all. But I think we have to blend that now. And post-COVID, absolutely have to blend it.
Since a lot of entrepreneurs are saying, hey, where do I spend money to fix these things? Like, are there things that you like? I mean, things we've experimented with, like 15.5 we've liked, other friends use Dream Manager. What are some of the hacks that you love that sort of like, not hacks, but fundamental tools that you would put to the mix?
I love that you just mentioned, but I've been an advisor and an investor in 15.5 since the month that they launched. David Hassel and I have been friends since 2007. And the Dream Manager by Matthew Kelly, I've had dinner with Matthew. He and I had dinner, just the two of us, with my son in Vancouver years ago. I've been telling people to read the Dream Manager again since 2007. It's a very, very strong kind of mindset and methodology about actually caring about people. So much so I was in a mastermind one time and I mentioned the Dream Manager and everybody started laughing. And I kind of turned and this woman goes, "I'm Mary, the book's written about me." I'm like, "No way, like you actually exist." And it was Mary Miller just sitting on the other side of the room and it was about her and her husband's company. So that was a bit of an ADD moment for you, but it's just caring about people. It's just really caring about them.
That's great. Well, look, how do people get it? Like I've jumped down the video rabbit hole and tried to learn as much about you, but somebody who's like, "Hey, I love this, I want more." How do they learn more?
Sure. We've got a couple of good YouTube channels. So the COO Alliance and the Second in Command podcast YouTube channels. Definitely check out our Second in Command podcast. My Invest in Your Leaders course is really worthwhile people signing up a few of their managers to go through that content. It's all the content around growing leadership skills in people. That's called investinyourleaders.com. And then check out the COO Alliance. If your company does at least 5 million or greater, it's pretty irresponsible to not get your second in command engaged in that.
Well, Cameron, thank you very much for taking the time halfway around the world to meet with us, but wish you well and thank you for all that you're producing.
Thanks, Seth. Appreciate the time.
Thank you for tuning in to the SEO Insider with Seth Price. Be sure to check back next week for fresh insights into building your brand's online presence. Episodes are available to stream directly on Blue Shark Digital's website.